If you've ever accidentally sent an email to the wrong person, you'll know what true unbridled panic feels like. I'll just say, always double check your attachments. Email is fast and helpful in so many ways, but its speed is also a big part of why email can cause some embarrassing mistakes, like accidentally letting the address autofill and sending a message with the latest family gossip to your professor or boss or secret crush. These embarrassing moments are no fun, but they do illustrate something important. We write in a different style, include different details, and with a totally different tone depending on who we're writing for. There's a lot we're trying to communicate, and we employ different strategies to reflect the message, context, or relationship. Though understanding why thinking about our audience is so important in writing isn't just about avoiding the wrong audiences. It's also about how we can modify our writing purposefully to achieve our goals and connect with our readers, the ones we want to read our stuff. Hi, I'm Dr. Emily Zarka, and this is Study Hall Rhetoric and Composition. Most everything we write is going to have a reader in some way or other. That's kind of how writing works. We have a purpose, and if we didn't want to communicate it to someone, we would have just shouted into the void. That means that writing is kind of like an exchange, and our audience, or the readers, viewers, or listeners who receive our work, is a major influence on what we write, even if that audience is ourselves. And understanding other people is challenging even when we know exactly who will read our writing. That's why writing for audiences can feel daunting. People are complicated. And even if we actually address all our emails correctly, we'll sometimes miss the mark with our audiences. Think of these common missteps as barriers, or ways that people shut themselves off from very important information about what their audience really needs. One barrier is the idea that my words speak for themselves, and refusing to change how we write for other people. We ignore all the past experiences and extra context that go into making a piece of writing clear and correct to us that other people might not have. Like, say an employer is posting a job listing, but the job requirements are densely worded, formatted in one big paragraph, and rely on a lot of jargon and inside knowledge only people who've already worked the company would know. If the employer didn't revise this draft and just let their words speak for themselves, a lot of great candidates might give up applying altogether. Maybe because they already lacked some confidence and now don't understand what they need to do to apply, or because the application is not in their first language, or because they don't have a mentor to help decipher the requirements. This means the pool of candidates might be pretty small, and the audience members who are likely to get the job are the ones who already share a lot in common with the person who wrote those requirements. Sometimes this can be intentional, either to avoid getting overwhelmed with applications, or even because they know they want to hire someone who's already within the company. But an employer who wants the biggest pool of excellent, diverse candidates would rework the job listing so that the hard part of the application is talking about the actual creative problem solving and communication needed to do the job well, not deciphering what the requirements even are. So when we get critiques or suggestions, they're a sign that even if our writing makes sense to us, something isn't working for our audience. And that means our writing is not fully achieving our goal, whether it's getting broad support for a new company policy or getting to choose a great new employee from a strong batch of applications. The follow-up here is another related barrier that people get stuck on, which is the idea that it's the audience's problem if they don't understand my communication. So even if they acknowledge their words don't speak for themselves, and there's a lot of additional context woven in or needed to fully understand, they still don't see the need to change their writing for other people. And yeah, there are times when the audience has to do some work to understand a message. Like if a company owner is hyper busy and writes a cryptic request to their employees, it might be up to us to figure it out and give it our best guess, even if the owner definitely could have been more clear and attuned to what the employees need to succeed. But if we want to be strong communicators ourselves, we can't assume our words speak for themselves, and we can't just let ourselves off the hook, even if we're in charge. Sometimes clarity is just part of successfully achieving our goals to communicate, act, or reflect. Other times, not taking our audience into account is a form of exclusion. So we can't shut ourselves off from information our audience gives us. We have a responsibility to consider our audience's needs, reread our work with them in mind, and add clarification when we can. Of course, recognizing that considering our audience is important isn't the same as knowing how to put that in practice. A very reasonable defense that many people have, especially when working or writing for school, is that they don't know who their audience is. But we have more ways to understand our audience than we might think. As writers, a good way to start addressing our audience in more depth is to pay attention to the assumptions we're making when we write something, including what we'll call the 3 A's of audience, based on the work and experience of our partners at ASU. First, we ask ourselves what we're assuming about the accessibility of our writing. Accessibility ranges from whether our audience subscribes to the publication we're using, to whether they have internet access to read our work, to whether the format is even one that they can use. For instance, there are people who get bad headaches if they read for a long time on a screen. So if you write thousands of words on your blog, but don't have an audio version, that part of your potential audience may not really be able to access this work. Or when we examine our work for accessibility, we can take into account different ways of learning. Like if we speak very quickly when reading a script, our audience may or may not be able to absorb it without slowing the video down. So having a button that lets you make the video play at half speed boosts your accessibility for a wider audience. Next, we think about the abilities we're assuming our audience to have. Think of this as everything from having a background in the language we use to communicate to having studied a specialized field like engineering or social media management. In any community, there's usually some jargon or special words that are used mostly among that set of people. If our audience is firmly within that industry or field, we may be able to use those words easily without explaining ourselves. But if our audience includes beginners or people with different backgrounds, they may lack the key abilities to understand and engage with our work unless we lay out a few definitions. Finally, consider awareness. In a world full of different kinds of writing, we want to consider who would be aware of this piece of writing and how they would find it. Political writers have to keep this in mind when they write in divisive political circles, thinking about whether their work is likely to reach people who already agree with them, or whether it will be distributed or shared in a way that it garners lots of viewership from people who dislike their perspective. These aren't the only audience considerations to rely on, but they are a good start. Overall, when we aren't sure who exactly we're in dialogue with, it can be helpful to construct a profile of who that reader is, or what composition scholars Lisa Eade and Andrea Lunsford call an audience invoked. An audience invoked is a mental model of the kind of person who's reading our work. While we recognize that they're usually a simplified version of the real audience, it still helps us make choices to take our audience into account. For instance, if you buy a microwave and realize that the light bulb inside is broken, you might initially want to fire off a complaint letter and expect whoever receives it to deal with it. It'll convey both frustration that the product didn't work, as well as demand the company send you a new light bulb. But if I take even a few minutes to think about my audience, I realize that I'm not writing to a general audience at all. I'm most likely writing to a customer service representative who isn't responsible for microwave assembly and also deals with frustrated customers all day. I don't know them personally and cannot fully know them, so I construct a profile or audience invoked using my best guesses at who they are. Like if my bigger goal is to get the functional microwave I need, I can write with a tone that recognizes the pressures of working in customer service. This reader probably doesn't need any more angry words in their life. They'll probably do more for a respectful letter writer than they do for someone who made their day worse. I don't know for sure who is going to read this letter, but I am evoking an audience as I write. Someone who has been authorized to issue refunds and send replacements, but who may do so more readily for a kind writer. I might even add a note thanking them for being there to help customers. Sure, I don't know that my actual audience or audience addressed will appreciate this, but I think my audience invoked would respond well to this choice. This way, I can increase the chance of getting my replacement microwave. Overall, no matter what we're writing, audience analysis is very complex, and we have to decide how much we can learn about our audience in each writing context. And yeah, as we write for many different audiences, we may discover that we have to work harder to understand and empathize with audiences that don't share our own background, expectations, and values. But the payoff is a chance to have influence in circles beyond the people who are most like us, boosting our potential to be effective in our work, build a coalition of advocates for a social cause, or even just create a harmonious roommate relationship. So you might be wondering how we can invoke an audience when our audience is everyone. How can we think critically about our audience when we're addressing a general or global audience? But actually, I might turn the question back to you. Does anything really have a global audience? After talking through the 3 A's and then invoking an audience, there are a lot of limitations entirely outside our control that prevent us from truly reaching everyone. Like with a public blog post, we can still make educated guesses about the language the audience can read, their degree of internet access, and their interests, given that they were able to find the blog post. What's more, regardless of the size of our audience, we can also get some kind of feedback from them. That feedback might be concrete, like a comment suggesting that we research a little more deeply using a wider range of sources. It can also be new signs and contexts, like finding that we got a bunch of new readers after a particular post. So there are lots of ways we can learn from our audience and collaborate with them to make our writing better. Though, of course, even if we do a fairly good job of evaluating and writing toward an audience, we aren't magically transmitting our thoughts from one mind to another. So there will be moments of misunderstanding that we can use to continue growing. But whenever we work to understand an audience, instead of assuming everyone will automatically understand us, we grow as writers, becoming more versatile and able to adjust to new writing tasks and goals. We come back to the complexities of audience over and over as part of our efforts to practice what it takes to achieve effective writing. Our discussion may seem really abstract and may take some time to make sense, but this is also kind of a metaphor for working with audiences. They're rich, complex, and take time to understand and work with effectively. So whether we're trying to make our emails clear to our diverse business team or trying to get a new kitchen appliance, our writing connects better with our audience in mind. Thanks for watching Study Hall Rhetoric and Composition, which is a part of the Study Hall Project, a partnership between ASU and Crash Course. If you liked this video and want to keep learning with us, be sure to subscribe. You can learn more about Study Hall and the videos produced by Crash Course and ASU in the links in the description. See you next time.